Should be live on the YouTubes, but I just want to make sure. Cool. I am live. All right, cool. I get to do this Q&A now. Before I look like an idiot. So I'm just going to run down through the questions that I have already asked, and if anybody wants to ask me anything after that, you're more than welcome to do so. I'll try to answer as many as I possibly can. I'm only going to do this for like maybe 30 minutes or so. I'm not going to take too long because I don't want to take all of your guys' time. So let's get on with the Q&A. I didn't really get many. I got a few on Discord and a few on here. So we'll start off with the ones from YouTube. And apologies if I butcher your name. I don't think I shall, with like the exception of maybe one guy, which is I don't know if it's Mehmet or Mehmet, but he asks, or she, never assume genders, how old are you and how old were you when you started gaming? So I am currently 26 years old. I just turned 26 in July, as a matter of fact. And I was pretty much born with a controller in my hand. And the reason I say that is because my parents, I have an older sister, she's 4 years older than me, and a younger brother as well, who's about 6 years younger. And so my parents already had an NES by the time I was born. And by the time I got old enough to kind of have my first memories, my sister had pleaded her case to have a Super Nintendo in the household. And so my earliest gaming memories were games like Mario Duck Hunt combination cartridge, Nintendo Zapper game by the name of Gotcha, a weird obscure game by the name of Snake Rattle and Roll, and the I think Konami produced TMNT for the NES. Those were the four games I remember from the NES specifically. And on the SNES, I vividly remember Mario All Stars, Home Alone, Goof Troop, Spider-Man and the X-Men and Arcade's Revenge, for better or for worse, and Harley's Humongous Adventure and Bart Simpson's Nightmare. Those are the games I remember fondly from way back in the day. So those are my earliest gaming memories. I couldn't tell you a specific date. I just know I had been playing video games pretty much all my life. So, Mr. Ultimate asks, what would you say are some of your favorite games of all time? So this one's complicated. It's really hard to answer a question that is this broad because for me, the way my brain works, and this even extends to movies, I don't have a specific favorite, like all-time favorite. I have favorites per genre because there's so much to like and so much to absorb. So I could be here all day answering questions. But my top games, games that I always go to over and over and over again, no matter what. If I just look at it, I'll just be like, yeah, I'm playing that today. Deus Ex, first and foremost. That is my all-time favorite, like, game. If you put a gun to my head and said, pick your favorite game of all time, Deus Ex is the one. And if you want more information as to how I feel about that, go check out my revision review. Cheap plug. But yeah, it's Deus Ex, Spider-Man 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and in terms of like wrestling games, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain is probably my favorite. Those are kind of like my go-tos. Fighting games, Marvel vs. Capcom. I mean, that's just easy. Whether it's 2-1 Street versus Street Fighter, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel superheroes, I love that entire series and I can play all of them with the exception of Infinite because that game is actually trash. Sorry, the gameplay is not enough to salvage that for me. So, yeah, those are my favorites. So, moving on. Hey, Dark Knight fan, how you doing? You're more than welcome to ask questions as I'm just kind of getting through the ones that are already listed on the tab here. So once I'm done with the YouTube comments and the ones in Discord, I'll move on to the ones in the chat. So if you want to ask me any questions, you're more than welcome to do so. Shadow of Batman asks, who is your favorite Spider-Man writer? What is your favorite interpretation of Spider-Man? And what is your favorite era of gaming? Whew, that's a lot of questions. Okay, so favorite Spider-Man writer? So I kind of go by generation. I think despite Ultimate not being entirely like flawless from start to finish and really what piece of work is, Bendis' work on Spidey was pretty good for the most part. There was some kind of redundancies here and there, but I love Bendis' work on Ultimate, and that's probably the last real like run that I've enjoyed because I haven't read comics in like 2 years just because I haven't been able to. But yeah, his work in terms of the modern era stuff, if we're going back, like my favorite writer, even though like some of the stuff is super hokey for the time period, is probably God, his name escapes me. I have his collection here. The guy who made Black Cat. I'm blanking on his name. But hey, Shadow of Batman, I'm answering your question. I'm actually answering your question. Let me see. Creator of Black Cat. I have his book. If I go quickly just to go grab it, I'll probably remember. I know it starts with an Roger Stern. That's his name. I think that's his name. He's one of my favorite. Yeah. Even though most of his stuff is like hokey and there's a lot of stuff that I kind of don't like the whole contrived, oh, evil villain has a gas to knock you out thing. I hate that so much in comics, especially in that era. But there's a certain amount of charm to it, so yeah. In terms of favorite interpretation, Spectacular Spider-Man. I don't think anything. Okay, so if we're being honest, Spectacular is probably the number one best interpretation of Spider-Man, given the limitations that they had to work with, especially considering what they did with Tombstone, who was supposed to be Kingpin, but they didn't have the rights to. But there's a lot of things that they did. The liberties that they took made sense in the context of the story, and it was executed well. And the characters were all just spot on. And the voice cast, I mean, we don't have to talk about Spectacular. We all know how good it is. That's probably my number one favorite interpretation. Number two is Into the Spider-Verse, because that just encapsulates everything about Spider-Man. Number three is Spider-Man PS4, because again, it captures the best parts of Spider-Man. And after that would be the first two Raimi films. Those are, in order, my favorite interpretations of Spider-Man. In terms of what my favorite era of gaming was, so there's this period in time between the 16-bit era to the PS1. That transitional period, I think, was probably my favorite era in gaming, because at that point, developer creativity was at an all-time high. Around that time, you saw games kind of transitioning out of the platformers, going into more complex games, and kind of just experimenting on what it would be, or what games could do. And it wasn't as scientific as it is now. A lot of these publishers and gaming companies, they have like procedures, focus groups, and they're just kind of like, okay, well, what's gonna sell? And obviously the big thing now, the big fad, is battle royales. And so now you see games just mimicking the battle royale success and trying to implement it into their games, and everything has just become creatively bankrupt. So I think back in that era, when we were transitioning from generations, developers got more toys to play with, and they were experimenting more because they were allowed to. It wasn't so, there wasn't a penny pincher counting, beans, deciding, oh, well, we need to sell a first-person shooter for the 10th billion time because those are popular. That's the fad nowadays. So yeah, that's probably my favorite era of gaming, just because there was so much variety, and I kind of wish that was still the thing now. Quality variety as well, not just like shovelware like there is now. So Nicholas64 asks, do you have any plans to review other superhero games? Yes. Stay tuned. I actually have something special planned for October, so I hope I can get it done in time. Alrighty. I think we have more questions here. I'm sorry if I butcher your name again. I think it's Mehmet or Mehmet. He asks, what is your biggest reason to start a YouTube channel and stream? So honestly, the number one reason why I started my YouTube channel was to comment on videos. Like way back in like 2006. That's the number one reason I started my channel. But why I became active on it is a different story. So I'm a creative person. I have a lot of things about me that are kind of festering, like you ever just sit at your job and think, hey, I should be doing something with all these ideas that just get into my head. And that's kind of what I said to myself one day, and I was just kind of like, I love video games. I love entertaining people. It always makes me feel good knowing that I can make someone either smile, laugh, feel happy, or just nostalgic, and just kind of bringing together a community. That stuff gives me joy. And so I kind of just came to the realization one day, I was like, I can manifest all of the things that I kind of enjoy for myself and do it in a way to positively influence other people and make them happy and kind of nostalgic and just bring people together and have fun and just be creative and kind of get that outlet out of me. Ever since I was a kid, like I always excelled at writing at school. My teachers would always comment that my writing was exceptional, especially for the age group that I was in. Um, and they always said that I should try and pursue it, and that's this has kind of been my exercise to do that because in the everyday world you're not going to be just writing to make money. Like it's a really hard way to do that. So this to me is just kind of cathartic in a sense where I kind of just let out all the things that I wish to do, want to do, hope to do, have fun with it, get some creative inhibitions out, try to work toward goals. Like I would love to make small films every now and then, but it's just not possible. But that's kind of like what I do with these. So it's a combination of things, but those are the biggest reasons why. I have a lot of creative juices in my head. I like to experiment. I like to get them out there. I like to make people laugh and smile and feel happy and feel nostalgic and just bring a community together and just have people chatting and talking and just being cool with one another. I like to influence more positive vibes. So that's kind of the big reason as to why I got active on this YouTube channel. And I just used what I knew. I love gaming. I love Spider-Man. And I love to talk about things and go into detail about them because that's just me. How would you compare Spider-Man to Daredevil? This is Anthony Torres, by the way. Sorry for not mentioning that before. How would you compare Spider-Man to Daredevil, and do you think Daredevil should get his own game? Also, if you had to choose between a Spider-Man show in the MCU and a Daredevil movie done right, which would you choose? Okay. So, in terms of comparisons, they both basically were freak accidents and had a traumatizing event happen to them, of which allowed them to become a superhero. And that's about where the comparisons stop and start. Because Daredevil is an entirely complex character on his own. Matt Murdock is he's a really interesting character when you really look at the nitty-gritty. And you might say that he has his life more put together than Peter Parker does, being a lawyer and all that stuff. But yeah, he's a tough cookie, that Matt Murdock is. But that's about where the comparisons start and stop. I think there's a lot of parallels between them, but they're two very distinct characters, as we've all come to find out. And if I had to choose between a Spider-Man show and a Daredevil movie, a Spider-Man show in the MCU and a Daredevil movie done right, which would I choose? This answer might surprise you, but I would choose neither of them. Reason being is because I am sick of Spider-Man in the MCU. I think they have done that character a disservice, an injustice to that character. They've used Spider-Man to self-service themselves, and it's entirely obvious why Marvel wanted the rights to use Spider-Man in their Marvel movies. It's because Spider-Man is the name most synonymous with Marvel. If anybody thinks Marvel, they think Spider-Man. And so Marvel being Marvel, knowing that most people think of Spider-Man, even though these movies have amassed billions upon billions of dollars and these characters have become, household pop culture names, the number one character that they will always think of is not Iron Man, it's Spider-Man. So what is Marvel going to do? Devalue Spider-Man to build up Iron Man so that in the eyes of the casual viewer, Iron Man is better than Spider-Man. No. Wrong. And by doing that, you piss off the people who love Spider-Man and realize that this interpretation of this character is baseless. You're devaluing him. You're not giving him his just due. When you're pinching him to Iron Man and trying to make Iron Man feel like the cool one and trying to make him the more relatable one and have him be the bankable one, just for the sake of equity. And I think that's just wrong. It's a disservice to the character. And I can go on a rant about this for days, but I'm going to leave it at that. That's why I wouldn't want to see a Spider-Man show in the MCU, because I'm sick of that connection. And until Marvel, I feel like, gets 100% of the rights to Spider-Man, they'll never actually allow that character to have the justice that he truly deserves in terms of a proper interpretation that isn't being piggybacked off of Tony Stark. And in terms of a Daredevil movie being done right, as much as I would love that, I think that the Netflix shows have spoiled us to the point where Daredevil stories excel when you give them time to manifest, and giving Daredevil a 2-hour, 20-minute runtime to kind of go through the beats, establish characters, get you to feel for these characters, I don't think it would be enough time to really properly do that character, those arcs, enough justice, which is why Daredevil's seasons 1 and 3 are just like the best Marvel television ever, because they had so much time to build and build and build, and they finally got to this crescendo, and it just an amazing show. Like my ex, who not a big comic book person, we watched Daredevil together from start to finish. We watched all 3 seasons, and we agreed seasons 1 and 3 were just amazing, and she was hooked into that show. She was just as disappointed as everybody else was when Netflix decidingly pulled the plug on that show, but season 3 was masterpiece. She cried seasons 1 and 3. She cried after Ben Urich's death, and then she cried when Ray Nadeem died in season 3. So yeah, when somebody who is not a comic book fan at all gets invested into a show like that, you can't get that in a movie. I don't think you can get that in a movie. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I think that's the last YouTube question I have. I have a couple of questions here on Discord, which you guys can join if you just click on one of my other videos. You can go into the descriptions. There is a link to my Discord. So I'm just going to quickly look at the questions tab here. I have a few. Professor Q asks, are you only going to review Spider-Man games? No. I'm actually planning on reviewing other things. I've already reviewed other games, specifically like Mean Green's Deus Ex Revision, Toy Story 2, a handful of ones that I've actually done. But I'm planning on doing something for October that is, I'm not going to mention it. I had 2 plans for October. One of them was going to be, I can mention this one. One of them was going to be a Web of Shadows review, but that review is going to take me a little while. It shouldn't take me as long as Spider-Man 3 did, because I don't, hopefully, fingers crossed, have like 3 more hardware failures and a graphics card that shorts out, or a processor that goes ballistic, or God knows what. But I do have plans to review other games, but my current focus is trying to get the rest of the Spider-Man reviews that I haven't been able to do for. So that includes Web of Shadows, that includes Amazing 1 and 2, and I might do Edge of Time. I'm not too sure. That's the one Spider-Man game that I haven't played. I have it, I just haven't played it. So I'm not too sure if I'll do that or Friend or Foe. I might do those 2. Might leave them out. I guess it just depends on how I'm feeling about them. But I do plan on doing other things outside of the Spider-Man realm. I'm just focusing on Spider-Man because that's kind of what I initially set out to be my goal, to review all the Spider-Man games, and so that's what I'm gonna do. What other plans do you have for your YouTube channel? Currently, I don't really have that many plans because I don't think that far ahead. Same guy, asking the same question, by the way. I'd like to differentiate and do more things. I just don't really know what I could do. Because it seems like no matter what I do, the number one thing that people always come back to is the reviews. And it's my most popular form of content. I understand why. But it's very discouraging for me to try and do anything else when nobody watches the other stuff. So that's why I kind of refrain from doing anything else. Like the Let's Play, for example, not that I stopped working on it. I just haven't had enough time to really start recording stuff because I had a CPU issue that took like 2 months to solve. But the Let's Play, like, not too many people watch those, and so I have a bad habit of being discouraged about creating content, especially when things happen and I just see numbers and I'm just kind of like, man. Like, for instance, Spider-Man 3, that was a very anticipated review. 1 week out, I think the last time I checked the views for that video was like at 611 or something like that, and I was like, wow, that's pretty low for a video that everybody really wanted and like harassed me on everything that I ever did to get that video out. So that kind of bummed me out, especially when in comparison, I think Ultimate Spider-Man in its first day did like 1,000 views, which was insane. But, I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, so. You have that, you have things like Mike Matei from Cinemassacre, who stole not only footage from my reviews, but also my script from Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man. That was a whole debacle, if you guys weren't aware of that situation. So, yeah. I mean, I get discouraged easily, and it's hard for me to kind of branch out and do other things, but I do have plans. I just don't know if I can ever materialize them, just because motivation is one thing, and then just time and resources. Being one man and working on everything on this channel, it takes its toll. And I'm lucky enough now where I'm injured, where I have this free time, not working at the moment, being on workers' comp, to kind of focus my efforts, which is why you guys have seen as many reviews as you've seen recently, so. Now we're going to move it on to the questions over here on the live stream. Let's see. So DTX speaks. Number one, I know you may not be a fan of COD, but what do you think of World at War and Black Ops 1? Would you say those games were worth development compared? Would you say those games were worth development compared to Spider-Man 3? So I'm not. I don't want to say I hate Call of Duty. I actually was really heavily into COD from COD 4 to Modern Warfare 2. Um, and then when World at War came out, I wasn't too big into the multiplayer because vehicles ruined that game. But Black Ops 1 was actually my favorite Call of Duty for the longest time because it was a great story and it just evolved the series naturally and it got rid of some of the more crazy stuff. Although, admittedly, I do miss most of the crazy stuff from Modern Warfare 2. Like the tactical nuke was amazing. Like getting a nuke in that game was just perfect because it was just the best way to just mess with people. Like, oh yeah, hell, what was it? Harrier, chopper gunner, nuke combo. That I had good memories, but don't get me wrong. I don't hate Call of Duty. I hate what became of Call of Duty once the success came in, where they started pumping games yearly, and it was just the same iteration, same animations, same everything. Just it became degrading. It became devalued. They diluted the product after Modern Warfare 2. But World at War and Black Ops were actually really, really good installments. I actually enjoyed both of those games. The Treyarch has always been phenomenal, but I don't know if it was financially, it was probably worth it for Activision for them to take the development manpower off of Spider-Man 3. If indeed that was what happened, we're not too sure. That's only speculation. But if they actually did take manpower away from Treyarch from working on Spider-Man 3 to work on World at War, then I guess it financially it paid off. It just never really paid off for Spider-Man because up until that point, Activision's biggest cash cows were Spider-Man and Tony Hawk, and both of those games started dwindling because the quality of those games started going down. And when they struck gold with Call of Duty, it didn't matter anymore. But had that gamble not paid off for them, then yeah, I would have said that the decision to take Treyarch off of Spider-Man to work on Call of Duty would probably have been a really bad mistake. Because, like I said, Spider-Man was the biggest cash cow, so good for COD, bad for Spidey. Alrighty. Can you please review the Incredibles games from 2004? I don't own those games, so I can't review them. I can only review games I own. But we shall see. Roger Stern created Hobgoblin, so he didn't create Black Cat. I must have been mistaken. Oops. But he's I like Roger Stern. Spectacular Spider-Man is so underrated. Yep. DTXP 1990-2005. Dark Knight fan asks, how do you feel about the Sony and Disney departure? It's rough. I feel bad for the MCU fans, but it's business. That's the way it was going to go. I had a feeling that this was going to be the way that it happened anyways. Marvel is... I don't understand why they wouldn't secure this deal for longer than they did. Because what was it? Like, they... Was it like a 6-film deal? And knowing how much they do crossovers, like, they couldn't say, hey, let's do, like, maybe an 8-film deal. You know? The whole thing is just mind-boggling, but it doesn't... I don't really care for it, but I do feel bad for the MCU fans because they're not going to see their interpretation of Spider-Man be further represented. And that, to me, is a shame. Even though I don't personally agree with it, even though they're enjoying the character, I think that's kind of a shame for them not to be able to enjoy the character anymore. And to me personally, like, I'm more bummed out that we don't get to see... I was bummed out pretty much because the interactions we could have seen with Spider-Man and other heroes was so limited to begin with, just because of the Tony Stark connection. I wish we had more Cap and Spidey moments. Like, nothing is going to ever come close to that Civil War panel where, you know, Spidey and Cap have that kind of heart-to-heart. And I was kind of hoping that we would get something similar, especially coming off of the events of Infinity War and Endgame, that Spidey and Cap would have those moments, but Cap is gone, so that moment is never going to happen. And Doctor Strange and Spider-Man would have been an interesting development to see them further develop down the line. I think we got robbed of that, and that's unfortunate too, because Spidey Strange is it's pretty entertaining stuff if we've read anything in the comics. But yeah, that whole deal, it bums me out for those reasons because we're not going to see those interactions. I think those interactions in and of themselves sell those movies, but I'm not heartbroken over it. Shadow of Batman says, to be fair, I feel like they devalued Thor and Hulk, even though I'm not crazy about those characters. I feel for fans who wanted proper Simonson Thor and Planet Hulk. Yeah, yeah. Well, Hulk especially. Hulk, oh my god. Thor, I feel like they did what they did with Thor just because audiences were not connecting with him. So they were like, what do we do with Thor? Well, let's just make him a complete mockery of himself. Just have this meta humor and whatever. And I guess it worked. People love it. And don't get me wrong, it's entertaining. But Hulk was the thing that boggles my mind so much with Hulk. Spoilers for Endgame. Infinity Stones emit gamma radiation, right? That is what creates the Hulk. So theoretically, the power of these stones should just absorb into Hulk and make him more stronger. Instead, it just makes him weaker. He loses his arm, he gets like shrimp dick arm. And like, man, and he gets nothing. He gets nothing the whole movie. And that just, it's the Hulk. There is so much opportunity for you to have set pieces and just amazing moments with the Hulk. Showcase his power, showcase his brains and his bronze if you want to do Professor Hulk. That's fine. But just nothing. He was so shortchanged in order to fit the egos, I feel like, of I don't want to say Chris Evans because I don't feel like he really is an egotist, but we know for sure that Robert Downey Jr. needed to get his shots in and to be built as this messiah, essentially. I don't know. That movie just bugged me. Its whole climax, the way they handled certain characters in that movie, just, it's like, really? But that's another rant for another day. Are you against Patreon or Twitch? You need money for equipment, man. I actually stream on Twitch. I try to promote it as much as I can. It just seems like people aren't too interested in watching me on Twitch, unfortunately. I do have like 500 followers on there, but I only get like maybe 2 or 3 people to watch me at any given time. So for those interested, it is twitch.tv/P1SM. It's the same thing as this YouTube channel. That is my Twitch. You can follow me on there. I'm actually planning on streaming some Spyro 2 later to finish out my 100% run. So I'm not against it. I just don't know how to properly implement it. Like, I want to give thanks to people if they do donate stuff. I want to give back. That's something that I would eventually love to do, is just give back to people. And so whether that's through behind the scenes stuff or just, you know, credits at the end of a review or something, just thanking all the people who either donated or just put in time or just showed support, you know, like, I gotta think of something. I just don't know. I don't know how to properly implement that stuff. So, will you re-review Enter Electro and Spider-Man 2002 or Spider-Man the movie game, right? So, I don't know if I'll re-review Enter Electro. I know for sure I won't re-review Spider-Man 2002 because I'm kind of happy with the way that came out. The reason I felt like I had to re-redo 2000 was because that was my very first review, and that was rough. And I can't watch that review. I can't. You guys probably watch it and think it's fine. I can't watch it because it's such a clear example of me not knowing what I'm doing. Me thinking that I had some form and structure and not really having it at all. And so I didn't really talk. I mean, I talked about the game, sure, but I talked mostly about the story, and I didn't go into detail as to why it worked. And so I just felt like I needed to fix that review. I don't know if I'll do Enter Electro. I'd have to look at that review again. I haven't watched many of my stuff over since I like published it, so. But I feel like that one's okay. A lot of people complain about it, saying that, like, oh, the Shocker boss fight, it's easy, and it's like, okay, sure, yeah, maybe it might be easy to you, but the reality of the situation is that Spider-Man Enter Electro likes to force itself upon the players the worst mechanics of the game. All the stuff that is just super clunky, hardly functional, is the stuff that Enter Electro tries to push onto the player as much as possible, and that makes the game way more frustrating than it has any right to be. Like, web yanking is fun and stuff, but when it becomes the central prime focus of a boss fight, as well as positioning him in order to actually get him to actually be in a spot so you can yank things down to get the maximum amount of damage to him, it does not work. It's just not fun. And I think I made that point pretty clear. But not too sure if I would do a re-review about that. Hey man, how you doing? I just answered your questions at the beginning of the stream. So whenever I go offline with this, you'll be able to hear them there. But yeah, I think the one review that I might redo, and I'm not too sure about it, if there is one that I might want to redo, it might be Shattered Dimensions, because a lot of people seem to really dislike that, even though I think I was pretty honest with it. But that one seems like just people hate what I had to say about the game, so I might give it another look and see if my opinions change and try to redo that review. Maybe. We'll see. Do you think Carnage or Sabretooth fit in the MCU, or are they too powerful violent? Sabretooth can fit. I think he can fit. Carnage might be a little too violent for Disney. So I don't particularly see him being implemented. And if they do implement him, they're probably going to strip him down the same way that they did with Venom. So, and as much as I would love to see a proper Carnage movie, I don't want to see him Disney-fied. I don't want to see him being used for comedic effect. I don't want him to be PG-13'd, basically. So, yeah, I don't think he would fit. But Sabretooth, definitely. I mean, we already had Sabretooth in 2 films. None of them were really great. I mean, Liev Schreiber was probably the best Sabretooth that we got. And even then, his frog jumps up those buildings in Origins. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. One sound could be properly used to describe that's that sound. So just watching him do those frog jumps up the building trying to scale it. Oh my God, Origins, what a movie. But yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I might just take off here and prepare for some other stuff later. I think I got all of them. I got the ones on my Discord. I got the ones on YouTube here. Don't know if I got any more. Trump, my joy. Is this where we talk about the greatness of Donald Trump? This is where we remove the comments about Donald Trump because we don't get political here. We're trying to keep a positive environment. And let's not bring in negative things to this channel. Thank you very much. Favorite mutant character in Marvel Comics? There's so many. But Wolverine. Like, just, he's a badass. How can you not love Wolverine? I think Scott Summers is vastly underappreciated, though. He's probably number 2 for me. I know he's a Boy Scout and people hate him. And Marvel has kind of written him to be a massive douchebag. But I like Scott. I think he should be properly represented. And I think he should not be shafted for Wolverine like he consistently is because of who's popular. I think Scott should get more respect. So, Scott. Oh, by the way, Anthony, I'm so sorry. I missed part of your question. I just realized this now. You asked if I think there was going to be a Daredevil game. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think Marvel Games is actually developing in secret a Daredevil game. In Spider-Man PS4, as we all know, the raft was broken into, and multiple convicts escaped. One of those convicts in the raft was Wilson Fisk. And if you don't think Wilson Fisk got out and is now establishing a new plan, you are sorely mistaken. That is absolutely the case. I can guarantee that. And that would be a ripe opportunity if I were Marvel Games to start establishing a Daredevil game. Now, I don't think we'll hear about it until after Avengers is out, but I do definitely think that a Daredevil game is imminent. I think it would be the smart thing to do to capitalize, especially off of the popularity of the Netflix series. A Daredevil game, it just has to happen. It has to happen. I don't think it'll be an open world game. I think it'll be a much scaled down game, kind of along the lines of a Arkham Asylum. That would probably be, if I were making that game, that would probably be the approach that I would take to a Daredevil game. but I definitely do think that a Daredevil game is in development. I can't confirm it. That's all. Alrighty, let's see. Do we have any other questions? Iceman, yeah, Iceman's cool. Iceman's cool. Good old Bobby Boy. He's cool, pun intended. Nightcrawler's also cool. Play more Spyro on stream. I will. I just mentioned this earlier. After I was done here, I'm gonna prepare for my Spyro stream over on twitch.tv/P1SM. If you guys want to tune in and hang around there, you're more than welcome to do so. Do I watch anime? I actually don't. The last anime that I watched was Death Note because a friend wanted me to watch it, and we just made fun of the potato chip scene over and over and over again. And that was about it, but I never finished the series. I stopped watching it right around the time where, God, who was it? What's his name? It's like the weird dude who kind of sits weird on the computer. He started working with Light to kind of figure out who Kiro was. That's around the time I stopped watching it. He's everybody's favorite character. I know that for sure, though. But that was the last anime that I really, really watched. You'd have to go back as far as like Dragon Ball Z and Toonami for me to really be honest about when I watched the anime, because who didn't watch DBZ? You asked another question above. Is it 3-part post? Let me check it out. I'm not sure where the question is. I don't see it here. If you want to ask again, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay. What do I think about the newer DX games? So, the newer DX games, are we talking about post? Are we including Invisible War, or are we not including Invisible War? Because if we're not including Invisible War and we're just going straight to the Eidos Montreal games, then Missed Opportunity, I think, would probably be the best thing I can say about the Deus Ex games, the newer ones. I'd love to see where the series goes, but at the same time, I'm kind of worried about where their creative vision is taking them, because Deus Ex Mankind Divided was a gigantic disappointment. Gameplay is probably the best Deus Ex that there has been. I have a lot of fun playing that game. Story-wise, it's super disappointing because it never kicks it into gear, and when it finally does, the game just ends abruptly, and you never really feel like there's a sense of conspiracy. Like that's the biggest thing about Deus Ex, is that there's this overarching narrative, and there's so many twists and turns, and so many things that are being set up, and so many things that are just, they're very clearly visible to you, but only after the fact. And with Mankind Divided, you don't ever really get that. It feels more like a crime drama. And I'll do a review on this game later. I'm fully planning on reviewing almost every game in the Deus Ex series that I possibly can. I don't know if I'll actually be able to do Invisible War, because I've tried streaming that game, and for whatever reason, OBS does not play well with that game in particular. I think it's because it's an older game, and so like it just has trouble getting the resolution and running it, because the game likes to crash a lot on Steam, so unfortunate. But yeah, Missed Opportunity. They had a lot of momentum coming off of Human Revolution, and Human Revolution was actually a really good game, even if the gameplay was a little clunky. I think overall, narrative-wise, it was pretty good. But Mankind Divided just felt like a really bumpy road, and there's a lot of things, like they left off the most interesting aspects of that game. Like what happened to Jensen after the events of Human Revolution is still a mystery, and that should have been the game that kind of expanded on that and gave you more answers to those questions rather than just leaving it open-ended and saying, oh yeah, well, we'll answer those in the sequel. It's like, no, you got to answer it now and set up the potential to those repercussions in the sequel. That's how it works. You can't just another time for a review. Nico, you ask least favorite Spider-Man game. Amazing Spider-Man 2. Amazing Spider-Man 2. They had 2 years to work on that game and it's unplayable. So, to you. I can't believe that game. Spent $60 on movie tickets because that's the only thing I got out of value of that game. Do you think Disney watered down the Star Wars sequel trilogy and Incredibles 2 to copy the MCU? Don't really watch Star Wars, so I can't answer that. And I didn't watch Incredibles 2, so I don't know about that either. Not much of a Star Wars fan, sorry. If that's a heartbreak to some of you guys. I've never watched the movies, so I don't really know about them. I'm pretty sure if I watched the movies, I might be a fan, but I've never had the opportunity to kind of sit down and watch, like, I don't know how many of them there are now at this point. I had an ex-girlfriend who was a really big fan, though, and she probably could talk my ear off about it. You were saying that Spider-Man and Daredevil are, as heroes, in your opinion, very parallel. Yeah, I said that. I answered that question earlier, actually. And I wanted to know if you thought Sony should go TV with Spidey instead of cinematic, and sort of make a counter show to Marvel's. No, I don't think they should go TV. I mean, TV would probably be good to establish stories, but when you're... The number one thing that would kill Spider-Man on television is its budget. You can't do all that CGI, all that web swinging. You can't do all those villains without the CGI and the big budgets that the movies bring with it. And you can't contain those stories, I feel like, to an hour. You know what I mean? Like, you can establish things and establish like a slow pace and build to one villain, but I don't know. I don't think it would work. The budget is the number one thing that would kind of like have me really worried about. We get like Japanese Spider-Man level of budget, I feel like, for those shows, considering how cheap Sony is. They're not exactly thriving financially. They are now, since Spider-Man grossed over like $1 billion, but I don't think they want to spend more than like $100 million on a production. So they spend more, I think, in marketing than they do on their actual productions, to be honest. You think the problem with the whole multiple endings thing is how do you do a sequel? Well, yeah, that's the problem with multiple endings, and that's why Deus Ex struggles when the next iteration, like, it always struggles with the sequel. So Deus Ex 1, amazing game, fantastic. Its ending was open ended. It allowed you, the player, to create the choice that you wanted to basically establish the future that you would think would be best. When Invisible War came out, it basically said, screw your choices, we're just going to merge all three of them, which I think is the biggest disservice you could possibly do. Because it just takes the player choice out. It just made you feel like, okay, we went through 20 hours of Deus Ex to just be told that our decision doesn't matter now because you're just going to merge them all anyways in the sequel. I think establishing, and this is like extremely tough, so I know why they didn't do it, but establishing a system where it says, okay, which ending did you choose, and then continuing a playthrough from that ending that you chose from would have been a smarter choice to go through. But then you would have had to essentially create or develop 3 different games in one game. You would have had to establish 3 narratives for one game, and that's difficult. So I don't fault them for doing the cop-out and going with all 3 endings being merged. But they did the same thing with Human Revolution into Mankind Divided. But the problem with doing that in Human Revolution to Mankind Divided was that there were so many questions coming off of the events of Human Revolution that just never got answered. And I think if they would have at least answered some of those questions and left others open ended, people would have been happier. But they didn't answer anything because they were so focused on this crime drama about this bombing and then this like weird conspiracy that never feels big enough. And I think that's the problem. The scope is so small in comparison to like even Deus Ex 1. Deus Ex 1, the scope in terms of the conspiracy was massive. It was basically a worldwide conspiracy when you really look at it, and you were globetrotting because you were going from places like New York to Nevada to Hong Kong to where else would you go in that game? I mean, you pretty much to Paris, pretty much went all over. You know, you went from globe to, you know, from country to country, from one side of the country to the other. And when you really got to the nitty gritty and you got to the end game, you really got to see how big this massive conspiracy was. And Mankind Divided, it just never felt massive. It felt like the game was just kind of grinding out its gears, just very elementary, to say the least, and that's unfortunate, because they're very talented people, and the lead writer for those games, I know she's great. Like, I think her name is Mary. She's great. Like, she made Human Revolution story, and people love that story. I just feel like the sequel let everyone down because it was so lackluster in comparison. The scope needed to be upped, and instead they went for a more self-contained. And in an effort to do that, they kind of really crapped the bed there. So that's enough about DX. That's a whole other story for another time. You guys are getting me to talk too much about something. All right. Who is your favorite Spider-Man actor? Maguire. Maguire as Peter, Garfield as Spidey. I think he does a better job. Holland is okay, but I don't think he's had enough real material to work with, especially because like 95% of the time he's in a CGI suit, not actually there. So it's kind of a bummer, but yeah. I think he's a good Peter too. I think Holland's actually a really good Peter as well, so I can't discredit him. But as Spider-Man, he's kind of yet to come out of the shadow of the other MCU heroes, I guess. He's not allowed to be himself outside of Civil War. Isn't that something? Civil War, he was perfect. And then after Civil War, they just neutered him. They completely took away his legs. So, ending continuity, like in Infamous games, should do it. What do you think of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, though? It's a mess. There's some good things about it, but it's overall a mess. That's Sony just meddling their grubby little fingers on a franchise and trying to make it into a cinematic universe. If they had just taken away Electro and just left it to kind of a story between Gwen, Harry, and Peter, I think the movie would have been 10 times better. It still would have sucked, but it would have been 10 times better. And remove the stupid blood elements. Like, I just don't understand. Those writers just love their like mystical, magical blood. But yeah. Do I know about Spider-Man 4 fan film? Is it like a really, really bad one? Because I think I might have heard about that, but I've never seen it. Posting too much, but Deus Ex sequels should let you physically sync your decisions from prior games with other games to create a continuous narrative over many years. Yeah, that was something I was actually talking to somebody about, because it makes no sense for you to go through, like I said, it makes no sense for you to go through hours upon hours upon hours of gameplay in one game to make all these decisions for the next game to immediately just forget about it. They should implement a system like The Witcher did. So from The Witcher 2 to 3, there was a system in the beginning of Witcher 3 that basically allowed you to choose what decisions you made in the previous game to kind of influence some of the dialogue you would hear in the next game. That way, it makes it more in line, makes it more streamlined with your decisions in the past game, influencing stuff in the next game. That is something I could see. If they don't want to go through the whole like multiple narrative paths, they could just do that to at least give you the sense that, like, okay, my decisions mattered. They stuck. And you know, it's going to cost you a couple of lines of dialogue and some coding, I'm sure, but it'll be worth it just for the sake of continuity. Everyone is now jumping onto Deus Ex now because of the JC's Denton profile pics appearing earlier this year. Yeah, that's kind of been crazy. I've been seeing a lot of people with those damn JC profile pics, and I don't understand why. Can somebody, like, fill in the gaps for me? I don't understand. Like, is there, like, a meme or something? Because I've been playing these games forever. I've been streaming them forever, too. And, like, all of a sudden, it's become the in thing now. And I'm just like, what? What?
You what?
Yeah, exactly. So, strange. Do you think Will Smith or Ludacris or T.I. would have done a better job as Electro than Jamie Foxx? No. No. I think Jamie Foxx was the better actor out of all the people that you mentioned for that role. The problem is the role itself, the way that character was presented, was awful. The way that character was written for that movie was awful. Electro, if you look at the new animated series, if they had just borrowed that storyline, perfect. Perfect. Max Dillon, like Jamie Foxx's Max Dillon would have been perfect. If you just literally borrowed from that story from the new animated series, would have been fine. I mean, obviously you would have to change some things up. Peter is not gonna show up to like a 40-year-old's like party or whatever and bully him or whatever, you know. But if they had just taken the basic elements of that story and implemented it into their movie, you would have had a more infinitely better rendition than Jim Carrey's Riddler from Batman Forever. So, all right. So it's about 4. I've been doing this for an hour, I think now. So I'm just going to I'm gonna cut it off here. If you guys have no more questions, then I'm just gonna go eat some dinner, prep for my Spyro stream later, which you guys should definitely check out at Twitch TV/P1SM. I'll try and link it here in the chat so you guys can just do the things. You can hang out with me there and you can ask me more questions for sure. I'm more than happy to answer anything you guys might want to ask me. Surprised we didn't get any more questions about like Spider-Man 3, like that review in general. So when will I stream? I will stream at like about 5 p.m. Eastern time. That's when I'm going to start streaming. I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to get settled, freshen up here because I'm extremely warm. But yeah, no problem, guys. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks you guys for tuning in and for asking questions. I greatly appreciate all of you guys for hanging out. So I'll catch you guys on the flip. Take care. Have yourselves a fantastic evening. And I hope to see you on Twitch relatively soon. Take care.